So thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Jamie Vaughn, and I'm the Great Lakes Engagement Coordinator. You are all here tonight because you recognize that our Great Lakes are a precious and invaluable resource, whether you're an angler or a paddler or just enjoy our beautiful Great Lakes coastlines. You likely all recognize that they face threats and need protection and restoration to continue to be clean and healthy freshwater resources that we all depend on. So I'm really happy to share with you all that you can play a role in their protection by advocating for issues and policies that help make them better, whether that's voicing your support for funding like the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative that funds millions of dollars worth of restoration throughout the Great Lakes states, to asking your elected officials to act to address threats like invasive carp. So we are putting this training on to start building out a robust network of informed and passionate advocates for the Great Lakes so that when issues do arise that require fast action, we have you all ready to write a letter or to pick up a phone or even meet with your legislators to let them know how important the Great Lakes are to you. There is a Q&A feature in this webinar, so please feel free to throw questions in as they come up. And if I can address them live, I will. If not, we will address them at the end of the session. And I am very pleased to introduce you to Emily Baldoff, who's going to be leading our training tonight. She is TU's Mid-Atlantic organizer, and she's going to walk us through some great useful tactics for being an effective advocate.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Technical issue. Can you give me permission to share my screen?
Yeah, let's see if I can do that.
So while Jamie does that, folks, as she said, my name's Emily Baldoff. I work in our Eastern Policy Department at National TU, taking care of pretty much the whole Mid-Atlantic section of the US. I'm based out of a home office in Scranton, Pennsylvania. So I'm on the complete opposite side of the state as most of you are, but I do make my way out there quite a bit, and I hope to be meeting some of you in person at some point within the next year or so.
Yeah, Emily, you know what? I'll go ahead and share that from my screen because I'm not sure that I'm seeing a way to allow that. Unless you want to start, it might prompt me to give you approval, but otherwise I'm not seeing a way to do that.
No, that's fine. If you want to share the screen, I could just let you know when to advance the slide.
Sure. All right, thank you all for your patience as we figure that out. Can everybody see that now? Or Emily, can you see that?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, great. Go right ahead.
Okay, then we will get started. So once again, thank you for joining us for the Advocacy 101 training for the Great Lakes in Western Pennsylvania tonight. So first I wanted to quickly start off with just a little bit of what Trout Unlimited's policy staff normally does. So one big thing that we are that we participate in is stream protection upgrades and making sure that we're monitoring Fish and Boat Commission in Pennsylvania and other states, especially to ensure that wild trout streams have the proper protections. We also monitor the budget for state and federal responsible development, any new changes or alterations in regulations, and making sure other folks are following regulatory procedure, and also legislation that might be coming through. For example, some of the legislation in Pennsylvania specifically that we're looking at right now is clean streams funding and other environmental funds that could possibly come to the state that could be utilized by our local chapters. You can go to the next slide. So in order to understand advocacy or how to become an advocate, you have to start from the beginning and understand where items would come from that you would want to advocate for. So I'm sure most of you all remember Schoolhouse Rock with the song that I'm just a bill. So we're going to start off by talking a little bit about legislative and executive procedure. You can go to the next slide. So every piece of legislation ends up starting with a good idea or a bad idea sometimes, or there's a problem that's presented that needs to be solved and needs to find a solution. So the next step after that idea of a law or an act that should be passed, then you need to find a sponsor within either the Senate or the House of Representatives, or at federal level, the Senate or the congressional members. Sometimes there's more than one sponsor, but normally you need that one key sponsor on either side of the aisle who could potentially be the perfect backer and the perfect cheerleader pretty much for this idea to get pushed over the finish line. Next slide. So the legislative process is a very wonky thing. This is probably one of the best images that I've ever seen that explains pretty much the route that idea or that piece of paper with the bill on it. Just it's long, lengthy journey sometimes to get to where it needs to be or get to the president or the governor's desk. So on either side, the bill gets introduced on House or Senate, and sometimes there is a sister bill that would be very, very similar to one bill that might be on the House, and then it's trying to run in the Senate at the same time. And then if it passes both floors, it could potentially merge together. So either direction, it moves to a committee. So some of the committees that we focus on or would be looking for bills through normally come out of the Game and Fisheries Committee or the Environmental Resources Committee, or even sometimes, like, for example, if it could possibly have to do with wildlife corridors or something like that, it could be Transportation Department or the Transportation Subcommittee. Once the committee pretty much dissects the bill and puts things in and out of it and feels like, yes, this document is ready, that we're going to get this passed if we take it to the floor for a vote. So then when it moves out of committee, it will get put on the floor for a floor vote. And if the floor votes yes, then it moves down, it will get sent to the Senate. If it gets sent back to committee, that means that the committee needs to revamp what they've already written and try and get it to the point of being able to pass either the House or the Senate floor. So next, after it passes the House and the Senate, it will then move to either the governor's office at state level or the president's office at federal level, or AKA the executive branch. And then there, the governor or president will either sign the bill into law or veto it. There's a lot of technical things that can happen while it's at that executive branch desk before it becomes a law, but we're not going to jump into that today. So this is just a really good case for you to understand where we're moving towards so that we can show advocacy. Next slide.
Hey, Emily, are you still there? I did advance it, but there could be a little bit of a lag.
Jamie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Is everyone else back? I don't know
It
what
look,
just, I was gonna say, I don't know what just happened. I apologize. My Zoom kicked me off.
no problem. I might have had my internet flicker. That might have been the issue. So I apologize. It looks like all of our participants are in and I can hear you. So
Perfect.
we're
Then
good.
I will keep going. Okay, also too, I did see somebody raise their hand, just like Jamie mentioned at the beginning. If we're going to hold questions till the end, but there at the bottom of your screen, you can highlight and there's a Q&A section. You can type your questions in there and we'll make sure that we get through all of them before we hang up tonight. Okay, so as I said, once the bill has its co-sponsor and it moves to, or its co-sponsor and this co-sponsor puts it into, moves it into a committee votes on it, gets it out of committee, it goes to the floor. So these are just some pictures of the House and the Senate chambers in, I believe that's in Pennsylvania. And here's where the magic starts to happen. Because moving through on that vote can be very, very difficult. And before that bill gets to this point, that's where we come in, and that's where us as advocates are extremely important, because we are the people or the constituents going into offices and telling and explaining to other legislators who might not be a co-sponsor of the bill how important said bill is to pass, and these are the X reasons why, especially how that bill or that funding that we're requesting can be put into action back at their home districts. That's always extremely important when you're playing this type of baseball. But to understand, so if we as advocates can help get bills to this point, that is extremely important. Next slide. So, I'm sorry, I think my slides got out of, this one was supposed to be before then, so thank you, you can skip it. Moving to the executive branch, so signed or vetoed. So the three things could happen. Either it can be vetoed, signed, or no action can be taken. If no action is taken, it usually moves and ends up passing anyway, because there was no executive action on it. So once it's passed into law, there'll be a set date. Normally the bills end up taking effect usually after January 1st, but sometimes in December. It all depends on exactly either what the funding source is coming from or how the particular bill could affect other items. Next slide. So the Trout Unlimited approach to advocacy. Why are we here? We're here to figure out how we engage effectively as a nonprofit or as a volunteer group, and what makes Trout Unlimited's voice stand out so much and so particularly. Next slide. So we engage effectively because we focus on extreme core values that our organization has, and that's our partnerships with other organizations or municipal officials, etc., our science, and our bipartisanship for everything. We're extremely diverse as an organization, and as a group of volunteers, we're completely bipartisan. If you do not know what that means that we work with everyone. We are not a Democratic or a Republican or an independent or a Green Party organization. We want to make sure that everyone has access and opportunity to enjoy fishing and clean water and pure water to drink. So we're also extremely partner-based and a hopeful group, and extremely respectful. Trout Unlimited, I've seen it in many meetings I've gone to in state and federal offices. We're respected because we are very civil when we go into those offices, and our bipartisanship. We also focus on the big picture, and we're usually in it for the long haul. So we work on local stream issues across all different types of landscapes, from Alaska to Wyoming to Pennsylvania to Maine, and every stream in between. And we're focused on the resource politics and pretty much resource goals that remain the big picture, where in the end, we are all fighting for the same thing, which is clean water and protecting trout and salmon habitat and cold water fisheries. So doubling down on our strengths, that question that I said before, what makes us unique? So this is all what distinguishes our voices. We bring a very interesting realm of a sportsman and a conservation voice all grouped into one. And we really focus on the science and facts when we go into meetings to advocate for either environmental funding, conservation funding, making sure that streams are protected the way that they're supposed to, or lakes are protected the way that they're supposed to, and the species that we care about. So bringing that voice to someone in Congress or Senate or the House of Representatives is very unique and interesting. And especially even, I mean, just for example, in Pennsylvania alone, we have 49 local chapters and over 15,000 members. That's 15,000 constituents of Pennsylvania legislators. And I apologize that I'm not sure about some of the surrounding Great Lakes states on our numbers on membership there, but I know that there is a huge impactful amount of volunteers and TU members in the Great Lakes region, which can do bring a lot of effective advocacy and funding to the area. Next slide. So Trout Unlimited's model, as I said, is unique, and our volunteers are very work under very place-based campaigns, as I was talking about. So just specifically with the Great Lakes, for example, we have so many folks who live where they're advocating and also care and understand the science, the species, and the waters that we're trying to protect. So that's why Jamie and I are here to try and help kick that off and really push that forward to make very strong volunteers so that we can restore and protect our Great Lakes region and Western Pennsylvania. Next slide. Next slide, please, Jamie.
Hey, I did advance it, but there might be a little bit of a lag, so sorry about that.
Sorry,
Can you
Jamie,
see it
you're
now?
cutting out on my end. I'm not sure if everyone else can hear you.
Sorry, I might be having some internet issues. I did advance the slide, so it might just take a minute. Thank you, Greg, for letting us know.
Okay.
He said he can hear okay.
Thank you, Greg. I'm about to get a really bad thunderstorm, so I'm really hoping that that it lasts out until this presentation's over. So I apologize if there's any hiccups here.
Thank you.
Jamie, did you have anything to add before I keep going? I didn't want to cut you off.
No, that's great. Thank you so much.
Okay. So quickly on the TU's model, from rivers to hill, as we say here. So influencing decision makers will help get their support and acting on that. So bringing that place-based campaigns is also extremely important. So when you are working on a local level, it's going to be very easy to get, let's say that you were tabling outside of a grocery store and you were talking about a specific stream that is 2 minutes from where that grocery store is. That place-based campaign will make someone understand better because they are living where it is, where sometimes I'm sure all of you have run into the issue of sometimes when you're trying to advocate for climate change, it feels like it's such a big, wide, and broad topic, and sometimes it's very hard to help people understand the issues and whatnot. But then when there is a flood or the river floods from a major storm, it's a lot easier for that place-based energy to advocate for something because people are now affected by it. So streams that run through a city or run through a town, that's affecting folks every day. And those place-based campaigns really helps hit our voices home or hit what we're trying to engage on home. And then connecting to an advocacy or policy goal and engaging to use Advocacy Army. So we hope to do more of these trainings and really create those pocket groups of folks to, let's say there is a piece of legislation that ends up in either the state or federal legislature that is going to bring a lot of funding to the Great Lakes region or to the Ohio Basin. We want to be able to pull those folks who understand the science and who want to advocate for those tools. And we could come up with a mini campaign to, do maybe 15 legislator visits to bring that information to them and make sure our decision makers are aware of what's going on, or aware that there's these funds or programs that could be coming to the area. Next slide. So you also do not need Jamie and myself to hold your hand if you ever wanted to meet with your public officials. As a citizen of the United States, it is your right to be able to request meetings with your public officials. And I 100% suggest that you do if you have an issue that you would like to talk about. It's really not as easy as not as scary as it sounds. It's actually quite easy, and it's usually a phone call or an email away. Next slide. So how to set up a meeting with the public official. So the first thing that you're going to have to do is contact the office's scheduler. Usually you could do this by email or phone. If you are just starting out, it's much easier to do it by phone. If you Google your state legislator, so for sake of argument, I'm going to use my state legislator. So I would Google Representative Kyle Mullins, Pennsylvania. And a phone number is going to come up for either his Harrisburg or his district office. So I'm a constituent. I don't want to drive all the way to Harrisburg to see my representative. So I'm going to call his district office and ask either, may I speak to the scheduler, or may I have the scheduler's email address so that I can request a meeting with my state legislator because I want to talk about the Lackawanna River. So the contact at the office will either tell you which way their office prefers to schedule it. And then you will work out with that scheduler the date, the time, and the topic that you're going to talk about. And normally that scheduler will ask you to email them a head count if it's not just you. If you have a group of, if you're representing a group or your TU chapter is going to meet them, they may ask you to keep it usually less than 5 people in the office at a time. Now with COVID, depending on what office it is, sometimes it's a little less. So they'd want the head count, and normally you would give your names of your attendees, and some of the offices may request addresses. They're not going to spam mail you or anything like that. They're normally just asking that because they want to know who's actually a constituent coming to the meeting. So I mean, the one thing you can do is give the township and the zip code if folks are uncomfortable giving their actual physical mailing address. And that should suffice the office enough. And then provide a list of that issues that you want to discuss at this meeting with your state legislator, and try and keep free. Sometimes you only have about 10 to 15 minutes in these offices. So keeping very direct asks and minimizing how much information you're trying to talk about. And it's always good too that you can even print off information that you want them to look at, and you can give them a leave behind after the meeting is over, and with contact information in case they have questions. Next slide. I apologize how slow our internets are working at the moment. Thank you. So preparing for that meeting with your public official or your decision maker, after your meeting scheduled, you are going to want to prepare your asks and your issues list. So that ask and issues list is going to be your list of your 3 topics, or how many ever topics you have, and the notes and information that you want to get across during the meeting. So you might not necessarily want to share these asks and issues list with the legislator, but it would be good. It's always good to have notes printed out for yourself so you can keep yourself and your attendees on track. So once again, if you're going with more than one person, gather that attendees list and educate those meeting attendees on the issues that you'll be presenting at this public office. You normally want to designate a meeting lead or a moderator for the meeting who normally will guide the conversation.
All right, hopefully we haven't lost Emily for good. I'll give her a minute or 2 to get back if she's having some connectivity issues.
I'm back. I'm sorry. It has to storm on the day of a presentation. I'm so sorry.
No problem.
Where was I? Okay, designating that meeting lead or that moderator. So keeping the meetings on track, and there's always a very polite way that you can somewhat cut people off to move to that next topic. Besides designating that meeting lead or that moderator, it's always good to have a lead for each of your asks. So if there's 4 people attending the meeting, you can have your moderator and then 1 person per ask who would be that lead, who would be getting the information that you have on your ask and issues list across. And then folks could jump in with personal stories, which are always really good to add in there. But having those designated leads for each ask and issue is a really good way to keep the meeting flowing. And if you do have to courteously move to the next topic, you're switching speakers. So it makes it really easy where it makes it easy for a staffer or a legislator. Each topic is a different voice speaking, if that makes sense. It keeps you awake. And once again, it keeps that meeting flowing. So practicing prior to the meeting can also help build confidence and a flow for the meeting. So even professionals where I'm in Harrisburg more than quarterly, or Albany and Trenton and DC, where if there's a group of 5 of us going down to these meetings, we'll get together before these meetings and make sure that we know the flow of the meeting, know who's going to be all these leads. And if John Doe has a story about a stream that, or a story about a fishing trip he went on that's quick and makes sense to add to ask 1, the person who's leading that ask should know that, hey, there's a personal story we need to add in here because I can transition and ask him to tell us about that one time when he ran into a place where a dam needed to be removed, and this is why. So also remembering to dress professionally is extremely important. So, of course, you're not going to show up to this meeting in sweatpants and a sweatshirt, but either dress pants and a nice button-down shirt, making yourself look presentable, making yourself look like you want to be at that meeting really does help in the eyes of the legislators. They're going to be in business casual to business dress. So I would suggest that you try to dress the same. Next slide. Okay, so the keys to a successful meeting. So defining and communicating political issues persuasively can be a very a scary thing or trying to do scary thing to do. So political issues are presented in how political issues, are presented is a very important factor, especially to the extent when the issue if the issue will be supported or not. So using specific language to frame policy issues, to position your organization and its policy preferences to the greatest effect is extremely important. So, for example, if we are trying to advocate for environmental funding to clean up acid mine drainage, you're going to want to use terms like legacy pollution, or be specific if it was anthracite or bituminous coal mines that the AMD is coming from. You're going to want to know the history and those technical terms that those legislators or staffers are going to end up seeing within that legislation. So because you might go into a meeting and they might not know the bill number that you're talking about, or know or have seen the bill yet that you're in there discussing. So you always want to make sure you have that bill number and are using those key specific languages to frame that policy issue, and keep language in your favor, or keep language in the direction that you want to persuade that policymaker to move towards. So framing and defining those issues will help encourage the policymakers to share your perspective. And using those personal stories, especially when they take place within the district of the legislator you're talking to, is extremely helpful and might help persuade them to move towards the direction that you hope that they will. And then also suggesting what policy solutions that should be adopted or added in or taken out of that legislation is always welcome. And a lot of times staffers or legislators will remember. Explore them further. Next slide. Okay, so what to expect. I would tell you to expect to meet with a staffer from that office every time. It is not a bad thing. And it is not rare to set up a meeting with your legislator and not actually get him or her and get one of their staffers. Sometimes it's more important to get one of their staffers, or if the legislator is in the meeting themselves, it's always helpful when one of their staffers in there with them taking notes, because that staff are very qualified to listen to the issues and relay them back to the office. And also to relationship building with office staff can be very, very valuable. It's a lot easier for me to pick up the phone and call either the chief of staff or the staffer that works on environmental issues in a congressional office than it is to get the actual congressman on the phone, right? So having that staff relationship where it's almost a first name basis at some points, it could be very, very valuable. And sometimes those staffers end up moving to other offices if their boss ends up not coming up for re-election, or if they choose to move to a different chamber or whatnot. So building relationships with office staff is very, very important. And you should not get upset or offended if the legislator cannot meet with you and you're meeting with their staff. The information is getting to the office. And like I said, sometimes it's even more valuable to actually meet with the staff. So like I said before, expect to only really be in the meeting for 15 to 20 minutes. If you're in there longer than that, it's a win-win situation. You have more time to chat, you have more time to talk about your issues, and more time to do that relationship building. But I always say to prepare for 15 to 20 minutes, because they are very busy, and especially if you're meeting in the Capitol, they're getting pulled to session. There's different meetings going on. It's a much more fast-paced, busy time. So sometimes if you're looking for a longer meeting, it might be easier to get a district office meeting. Have a prepared leave behind packet to give to the office after you're done. So providing that clear list of stated asks is important. So you don't need to give them the whole thing of all of your notes, but if you do type up a one-pager that lists out what you were there talking about and your requests, that can be helpful. And also too, if you can do a printout of meeting attendees and their contact information, or just literally a stack of business cards that you stick in the envelope with your leave behind packet, is very useful in case they have questions or want to contact you to help move that legislation along. And also, don't be surprised or upset if the office cancels. Just respectfully request the meeting for a later date. They're usually pretty good at least giving you 24-hour notice, but things happen and it usually can't be helped. Next slide. So there are some do's and don'ts. The do's, I mean, completely are very obvious and make sense. So thank them for their good votes. If you can look up what their voting record was for the last few weeks, and if you can actually thank the legislators or their offices for something that they did, they love that. Starts off the meeting really fresh and good. Always a nice thing to do. Inform them if you are a constituent when you go into the office. So you can meet with legislators even if you are not a constituent. But if you are a constituent, make sure they know that. Clearly state your asks and your points of the meeting. Be friendly. Do good. So I always have shake hands on here, but with COVID, just follow how you feel safe, and the office staff will let you know what they feel safe with that, either the elbow bumps or handshakes or just verbal. Leave your contact information, and then ask official positions on your issues. So direct questions. Does your office support House Bill 000? Those direct questions, they might not answer them as directly, but you are asking those direct, or asking for official positions on those issues that you care about. And sometimes you get lucky and they'll say something, or they will say, yes, we support it. And then if they end up not supporting it, you can always do due diligence later and go back and ask why they didn't support it after they said that they would. Some don'ts. Don't yell at the staffers and the officials. I have been in meetings where a volunteer did that once, and I was never asked to come back to that office. There's no reason to yell at staff and the elected officials. It just doesn't help in any direction. Don't dominate the conversation. The whole point of going to some of these meetings, besides giving information, is collecting information to bring back. You're probably not going to go into a public office once. It's probably going to be multiple times for that same issue. So data collecting while you're in those offices can be extremely important. Don't use profanity. Don't tell them that they voted wrong. Don't overload that number of issues. Like I said, more than 3 can really strangulate your time. Don't be argumentative. But also don't be afraid to take a stand on an issue. You do not have to just sit there and agree with the legislator when he tells you how he feels you're wrong or doesn't want to support what you're asking him to. Like I said before, don't be offended if the official can't meet with you, and don't make promises you cannot keep. So if you tell the staffer or the official that you will go back and research something and get them information back, make sure you're doing it. Next slide. Okay, so after your meeting's completed. So when the meeting ends, shake hands, thank them for the meeting, and then after the meeting, you're going to want to send the office a thank you note along with the leave behind materials. So you could have a printed out packet of leave behind materials, which I prefer to do, but then I normally put digital copies attached to my thank you note that I send to the office in email form normally. And then pay attention to the public officials' actions after your meetings to monitor the effectiveness of your meeting, because then that will tell you whether or not multiple visits need to be made or more information needs to be brought to that office. And then multiple visits can be spread out over time if they need to be, if you need to have them, depending on the effectiveness as you monitor what happens in voting records and such after. Also too, if there are successes through the meeting resulting in like different votes, thank the legislator through one or more avenues. So thank you note to the office for thanking them for voting in a way that you were advocating for, or something else you could do is most elected officials will take a picture with you in your group after the meeting's over. So grab a picture with him or her, and then if they vote the way that you want them to, you can write a really nice Facebook, Twitter, Instagram post and tag their office in it, thanking them for supporting environmental funding or supporting clean streams. And you put that picture on there, and one, seeing the picture, they'll remember who they were meeting with, and two, tagging them with good and positive notes. Offices love that, and they're always very appreciative of it, and really helps with working with those offices in the future. Next slide. So I did add a slide in here for virtual etiquette, which I'm going to go over very quickly, just for sake of time. So we are in the world of using virtual meeting platforms right now. Some offices are still not taking in-person meetings, and they're still requesting that to use either Zoom, Skype, Google Hangouts, Microsoft Teams. So not very different from an in-person meeting. You still should be dressed proper. I still wear my dress suit, at least the suit jacket and the shirt on top, even if it's sweatpants on bottom where no one can see them. Wear proper attire, look presentable, just as if you were walking into that meeting. And then display your name and organization. Just for example, just like I have my name set up on the Zoom account. When we take the PowerPoint down, you'll be able to see it. But make sure people know who you are on your little screen. Turn off any notifications. So like your email pings and stuff, anything that could distract you or other people in the meeting. Turn on lights in front of you. You want it to be bright. You want people to be able to see you, so there's not tons of dark shadows. Look at the camera while you're talking. So don't, if you have a dual screen, try and make sure that you're facing where your camera is. Try not to really move around. Don't turn off your video while you're in these meetings. Mute yourself if you're not talking, and clear the space behind you. So you don't want tons of clutter and whatnot. So make sure that there's nothing really distracting within your video screen, and it'll give you a very good virtual meeting. Next slide. Okay, so how can you get involved in advocacy? There's many ways to do it, and most of them start with meeting with your legislators. But if you're not ready for that point, or if you are ready for that point, and then you want to know other things you can do next. So there's many different media outlets and media items that you can do, including opinion articles to the newspaper, letters to the editor, social media, sharing information on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, any of those social media outlets. There are so many now. And depending on what audience you're trying to reach out to can really depend on what media outlet you should be focusing on. And then even discussing issues with your family, friends, and your community. If there is a development that might impact an exceptional value stream in your town, start talking to people when you're at the grocery store or at the gas station or at the library, at a community event, and talk about these issues and why they could potentially be bad for the community. Or, hey, I noticed that there's so much litter in this one section down by the stream where there's this really nice trail. Maybe we should all join together and try and do a cleanup. And maybe we could go talk to our state legislator and see if there's funding to get a dumpster to get rid of all the tires that are right by the stream. Getting that community involvement, discussing the issues with your community, so more people than just folks who are always looking for environmental work can start seeing how they can get involved and be aware of the environmental issues in the community. Attending public events that address the issue, township meetings, municipality meetings, anything like that, watershed organization meetings. And then volunteering or community organizing. So that's a little bit of what I was talking about, the next step after discussing these issues with the community and your friends and family. And then also researching the issue and really knowing what you're talking about before you make any of these steps. So I really should have put that first. But the first thing that a good advocate needs to do is find your issue, research it as much as you can, find people who share the same interest and can give you more information, and then run with it. Next slide. So this was a lot to jam pack in an hour. And I'm sure that you might think that there might be a little bit of holes or something, or something I didn't address. So we are going to take 10 to 15 minutes for questions, but I wanted to throw up our contact information here. Jamie and myself are always available at our email addresses. And if you end up needing to have a phone call or whatnot, we can set that up later. But we would love to help you get involved and discuss any of the issues that you're concerned about and whatnot. Also, too, a great way to see what we're both up to. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So we each run our own Facebook and our own Instagram, and then Mid-Atlantic Policy also has their own Twitter. So those 5 handles, if you're interested, I would definitely jump on there. And this slide will be available after the PowerPoint as well. And we have some leave behind materials. I believe Jamie's going to email everyone that those are available. Next slide. So I always like to leave this slide at the end. The Lorax or Dr. Seuss brings you back to your childhood, where he knew how important it was to start people off young and teach you that you're never too young to become an advocate, because unless you care a lot, that nothing's going to change. So leaving you with one last note before the questions. My dad and grandfather taught me how to fish when I was 2, I think, as soon as I could hold a rod, and I never stopped. The only job I wanted to do when I got hit high school, I wanted to work at a fishing shop, and I did. I put myself through college being a fishing guide and kayaking guide, and I landed my dream job at Trout Unlimited 8 years after I graduated college. But fell in love with something that had to do with the environment, and then realized that it needed to be protected because there was things threatening it, and an environmental resource management bachelor's degree came out of that. So when you read this book to your grandkids or your children or nieces or nephews or anyone, it really is important to get that message across, that it's never too early or too late to become an advocate, and we're extremely important to make sure that good decisions are being made by our decision makers and elected officials. So Jamie, if there's anything you'd like to add, I want to give you the mic, or else we can start the Q&A.
Yeah, thank you so much, Emily. And thank you all who joined us tonight. I personally learned a ton, so I hope that you found it informative as well. And I will wait to see if any questions are going to come in. Larry did ask about this recording, and I will send it out to everybody who registered for the webinar. So you will get that along with the slides. Emily mentioned that we do have some handouts as well that you'll get. And we are going to distribute a survey just to get your feedback of how this training was useful. We want to put these on more. We want to make sure that we're doing the best job that we can. So if you do have the time to take that, we would really appreciate your feedback. And I also just want to note, wherever you are at in your advocacy journey, whether you just want to be on the lookout for action alerts and be sure to sign on to them and to call your legislators when you see an issue come up, that's fantastic. If you want to be more involved, if you're not already a part of a local TE chapter, you can join one. You can become their advocacy chair and help guide how they address issues in the Great Lakes and in Western PA. There's also a fantastic National Leadership Council group that meets monthly in the Great Lakes, and they are really dedicated to advocacy issues. They are full of legal experts and lobbyists, and they know their stuff. So if you really want to sink your teeth in and be really involved, I would love to connect you with that group as well, because they are doing some really effective work. So there are so many different ways to be involved as an advocate. And every way that Emily outlined is appropriate if that's what you're interested in. So We really appreciate your interest in this. And now more than ever, we need informed advocates helping to protect our Great Lakes because it faces all kinds of issues. I know we're all, if you're in the Midwest, probably battling some really extreme weather right now. There are so many threats we face. So also on that note, thank you for bearing with us through our technical difficulties and some internet outages, but I'm glad that we made it through the end. Please feel free to throw any questions in the Q&A if you have them. Like Emily said as well, we are available after this. And you can reach out. We can talk one-on-one if that's something you're more interested in. And we will continue to put these on for varying levels of advancement. So this was obviously an introduction to general advocacy, but we do want to be, putting on more of these as you advance in your journey and get more experienced. And so we'll dive into some case studies and topics so that you can get all the information and become more of a grass tops advocate rather than grassroots. So Emily, do you have anything else you want to add? I'm not seeing any questions come in. And I understand people probably want to get on with their evening, but feel free to add anything else. All right, well, I think that's it. Thank you all so very much for joining us tonight. I hope that we can connect in the future, and thank you so much for giving us your evening. I really appreciate it.